My family went on a luxury cruise without me and expected me to babysit. They didn't see this coming, and then Family dinners at my parents' place were always the same. My mom would flutter around the kitchen, fussing over a meal that didn't need that much attention. My dad would half-watch whatever game was on TV, and my sister, Cassandra, would sit at the table glued to her phone like her life depended on it. It was predictable, comfortable. But this time, it was different. This time, I found out exactly where I stood in my family. That evening started like any other. I was leaning against the kitchen counter, helping my mom chop vegetables while she chattered about how retirement was going to be so good for Aunt Maggie. Aunt Maggie, our family matriarch, had been the principal of a high school for 35 years. She wasn't just loved by her students and staff. She was the glue that held our family together. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every birthday party, she was the one who organized it. If someone was sick, Aunt Maggie showed up with soup. If a younger cousin was struggling in school, Aunt Maggie sat them down with a pep talk and some worksheets. She was the heart of this family. It made sense that her retirement would be a big deal. I'd been thinking about it all week, brainstorming gift ideas that would properly celebrate her years of hard work. So, as we sat down to dinner that evening, I casually brought it up. "Has anyone thought of a gift for Aunt Maggie?" I asked, grabbing a slice of garlic bread. "It's got to be something good, right? 35 years isn't small potatoes." For the first time all evening, my sister Cassandra lifted her head from her phone. "We're already giving her a group gift," she said. Then, as if it were no big deal, she added, "On the cruise." I froze, mid-bite. I blinked. "What cruise?" Cassandra looked at me like I had just asked if the sky was blue. "The family cruise. The one we've been planning for months," she said, her tone dripping with that particular blend of irritation and condescension she reserved just for me. Then, as if I were a child who'd forgotten her homework, she added, "Don't tell me you forgot." I set down my fork slowly and stared at her. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said carefully. "What cruise?" At this point, my mom, Paula, gave me one of those nervous smiles, the kind that told me something was coming that I wouldn't like. "Oh, Jess," she said softly, "it's not like we didn't want to tell you. We just thought you'd be more help staying back." Staying back? My voice was sharper now, my pulse picking up. I looked between her and Cassandra. Help with what? Cassandra, clearly irritated that I wasn't just rolling with it, sighed dramatically. "The kids, Jess. You're so good with them, and it just made sense for you to stay home and watch them while we're gone." The room felt like it had tilted sideways. I stared at them, waiting for someone to start laughing and tell me this was a joke. My mom busied herself with her napkin, and Cassandra had already turned back to her phone like the conversation was over. "Wait, hold on." I leaned forward, gripping the edge of the table to keep my voice steady. "You're telling me there's a family trip, a family cruise. Everyone's going, and nobody thought to include me? You didn't invite me?" Cassandra looked up again, her eyebrows furrowing. "Well, you don't really do big trips, Jess. You're not a crowds person, remember?" My jaw dropped. "You've got to be kidding me. That's your excuse?" "It's not an excuse," my mom said gently. "It's just practical, honey. You know how hard it is to travel with kids, and we thought, well, you'd understand. You've always been so reliable." Reliable. That word was starting to feel like a weight pressing on my chest. The reliable one. The helper. The person who never said no. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Wait a minute." I held up a hand and turned to my mom. "Who exactly am I supposed to be watching?" Cassandra smirked, like it should have been obvious. "Liam," she said, referring to her 3-year-old son, and Kara's twins. "They're just over 2 now. It'll be easier for everyone if you're here." "Easier for who?" I snapped. "Do you hear yourselves right now? You're telling me you planned an entire trip without me and just decided, without even asking, that I'd be fine staying behind to babysit? Are you serious?" My mom tried to soothe me with her soft voice and calm expressions. "We didn't mean to leave you out, Jess. We thought you'd be more comfortable here." Comfortable? Babysitting 3 kids under the age of 3 while the rest of my family lounged on a beach or ate lobster on a cruise ship. Comfortable? My throat felt tight. "I cannot believe this," I said, shaking my head. This isn't just an oversight. You didn't forget to invite me. You made a choice. Cassandra rolled her eyes, muttering under her breath, "It's not that deep. You wouldn't even enjoy the trip. That did it." "Excuse me?" My voice cracked, my anger bubbling to the surface. "So now you're deciding what I would or wouldn't enjoy. This is unbelievable." My mom's face crumpled like she was suddenly the victim here. "We thought you'd understand, Jess. We didn't want to upset you." "Well, guess what, Mom? You did." I pushed my chair back, the sound grating against the floor. "You want to know what's upsetting? It's not just that you left me out. It's that you assumed I'd have nothing better to do than clean up your mess. You didn't even think to ask me." Cassandra scoffed. "Why are you overreacting? We're bringing you back a souvenir." I nearly laughed at how absurd that was. A souvenir. Like I was some child they were tossing a cheap trinket to while they went and lived their best lives. My heart was pounding in my chest. I couldn't sit there for one more second. I stood up, grabbing my coat. "You know what? Have fun on your cruise," I said coldly. "But I'm not babysitting. Figure it out." My mom started to say something, but I didn't stick around to hear it. I grabbed my keys and I walked out. Outside, the cold Chicago air hit me hard, but it wasn't enough to cool the anger burning through me. I climbed into my car and just sat there, staring at the steering wheel, trying to process what had just happened. They had planned this for months. Months. And not once did anyone think to tell me. Invite me. Include me. No, I wasn't a member of the family. I was the backup plan. The help. Well, not anymore. The drive home that night felt like a blur. I don't remember the stoplights or the roads. I don't even remember parking my car outside my apartment. My mind was too busy replaying every word from that dinner table like a bad movie on a loop. How could they do this? Months of planning, and not one person thought to include me. Not one. Instead, they'd made me part of their plans without my consent, as if I didn't even have a life of my own. I tossed my keys on the counter and sank onto my couch, still fuming. Babysit. They really thought I'd just sit at home and take care of 3 kids under 3 while they sailed off into the sunset? I rubbed my hands over my face, trying to calm down. My sister Cassandra and her smug shrug flashed through my mind, and I clenched my fists. You wouldn't even enjoy the trip. The audacity. How dare they act like they knew me better than I knew myself? I'd never been on a cruise, and sure, I wasn't a big fan of crowds, but that didn't mean I wanted to be left out of a once-in-a-lifetime family event. It was the principle of it all, being written off and reduced to nothing but the family's reliable helper. I couldn't sleep that night. The more I thought about it, the worse it got. Every memory of stepping up for them came rushing back, sharper and heavier than before. The times I'd watched Cassandra's son Liam when her sitter canceled. The weekends I spent helping my cousin Kara with her twins so she could run errands. The late nights I rearranged my schedule to pick up my mom's prescriptions or help Aunt Maggie organize another family holiday dinner. I had done it willingly, sure, but now I realized how one-sided it all was. I was always the one giving. They never even noticed how much I sacrificed. Around 2 a.m., I made up my mind. I wasn't going to let them steamroll me. Not this time. I grabbed my phone off the nightstand, opened a text thread with Cassandra, and typed out a message. Me, "Hey, I want to come on the cruise too. I've got time off work and can book my own ticket. I'll meet you guys there." I hit send before I could talk myself out of it. It felt bold, maybe even petty, but I didn't care. I wasn't asking for permission. I was putting myself back in the picture, where I should have been in the first place. Cassandra's reply came the next morning, short and to the point. "Cassandra, sorry, no room left. Cruise is full. No apology. No sympathy. Just sorry," and a door slammed in my face. I stared at her text, my heart sinking. I didn't even hesitate to fire back. "Me? I can book separately. I don't need to be on the group reservation." Her response came minutes later. "Cassandra, even if you did, who's watching the kids? You can't just drop out like this. We've been counting on you." I read the words twice, my anger bubbling back up to the surface. Counting on me? Drop out? They had planned this entire thing without me, and were acting like I was the one who had made a promise I was now breaking. I called her immediately, my hands shaking as I held the phone to my ear. She answered on the second ring. Hey, she said, her tone flat. Cassie, are you serious right now? I demanded. Nobody asked me to watch your kids. You all just decided I'd do it. That's not fair. You're being dramatic, she said, sighing into the phone. We thought you'd understand. You're always helping out with Liam anyway. That's because I choose to help. My voice was rising now, but I didn't care. This time, I wasn't asked. You made plans for me without even asking if I was okay with it. Jess, you don't have kids, Cassandra snapped. You don't understand how hard it is to plan something like this. You're the only one who has the flexibility to stay back. There it was. The real reason. The fact that I was single, childless, and in their eyes, obligation-free made me the perfect person to dump their responsibilities on. That doesn't mean I don't have a life. I shot back. It doesn't mean I don't deserve to be included. You planned this for months, and I'm just now finding out. You could have told me. Well, it's too late now, she said. You're being selfish, Jess. We've already got everything arranged. I gripped the phone tighter, my chest heaving with anger. No, Cassie. You're being selfish. You didn't even consider how I'd feel. And let me be clear. I'm not babysitting. Figure something else out. Fine, she said coldly. If that's how you want to be. She hung up without another word. I stared at the screen, still clutching my phone like I could shake some sense into it. My face was hot, my breathing shallow. Selfish. She had called me selfish. After everything I'd done for her and her family. The guilt trip didn't take long to arrive. That afternoon, my mom called. I knew the second I picked up that she'd already spoken to Cassandra. Jess, she started, her tone soft and carefully measured. I just don't want there to be bad blood between you and your sister. This trip is important to everyone. It's not about bad blood, Mom, I said, trying to stay calm. It's about respect. You didn't invite me. You just assumed I'd be okay babysitting. That's not fair. She sighed. Honey, we thought you'd understand. Families help each other out, and you've always been so reliable. That word again. I muttered bitterly. Reliable. I'm done being the fallback option. If you needed help, you should have asked. You don't get to make that decision for me. Jess, please, she said, her voice softening into that guilt-laden tone she always used. We didn't mean to hurt you. We just thought it made sense. You know how hard it is for your sister and Kara to juggle everything. That's not my problem, I said firmly. I didn't sign up to babysit. Don't say it like that, she said quickly, her voice shaking. We're all counting on you. Then find someone else to count on, I replied. Because I'm not doing it. There was a long pause on her end. For once, my mom didn't have a comeback. Finally, she sighed again. I just hope you're happy with yourself, she said quietly, and then the line went dead. I sat there in silence, staring at my phone, my heart pounding. That was it. The conversation was over. For the first time, I'd said no. I'd set a boundary, and it felt both terrifying and exhilarating. I knew this wasn't over. The fallout was coming. But for now, I sat back on my couch, folded my arms, and let the weight of it all sink in. This time, they weren't going to walk all over me. Not anymore. The silence that followed my fight with Cassandra and my mom should have been a relief, but it wasn't. It was that kind of quiet where you know a storm is building. Slow, brooding, and just waiting to hit. My phone stayed mostly quiet for a day or two, but every time it buzzed, my chest tightened. I knew it wouldn't be long before someone else tried to reason with me, but I was done being reasoned with. For 2 days, I sat in my small Chicago apartment, teetering between anger and sadness. I'd replayed the dinner, Cassandra's snark, and my mom's guilt trips so many times it made my head spin. The worst part wasn't the exclusion itself, it was what it revealed. I wasn't seen as a sister, daughter, or family member worth celebrating with. I was a resource, someone to step in when their lives got too inconvenient. I couldn't unsee it, and I couldn't let it go. By the 3rd day, I knew I needed to get out of my own head. I had time off work already approved since I'd planned to take a break after Aunt Maggie's retirement party, which I'd assumed we'd all celebrate together. I wasn't about to spend that vacation sulking at home while my family sailed to Hawaii without me. I grabbed my laptop, poured myself some coffee, and sat at the kitchen table. I opened up a new browser tab and stared at the search bar, fingers hovering over the keys. Where should I go? A small part of me wanted to book my own ticket to Miami just to prove a point, but I quickly let that idea go. Why should I spend thousands of dollars to crash their trip? No, I didn't want to chase after them. I wanted to do something for me. I thought back to a conversation I'd had months ago with a coworker, Lisa. She'd taken a solo trip to a secluded cabin in Tennessee, tucked up in the Smoky Mountains. I remembered her raving about how peaceful it was. Hiking trails, crisp air, and a hot tub with views of the rolling hills. It sounded like exactly what I needed. My fingers typed faster than my brain could second-guess me. Smoky Mountains cabin rentals. It didn't take long to find a place. A small log cabin with a stone fireplace, huge windows, and a wraparound deck. The pictures showed hiking trails nearby, a cozy living room with books stacked on the shelves, and the hot tub Lisa had mentioned, perched on a private balcony overlooking a sea of trees. It looked perfect, peaceful, mine. I booked it for a week, starting the same day my family would be boarding their cruise ship. It felt poetic in a way. While they were sipping cocktails by the pool, I'd be watching the sun dip below the mountains with no one to bother me. The morning of their departure, my phone started buzzing as I packed up my car. I glanced at the screen. Mom, when can we drop the kids off? Cassie's already on her way. Cassandra, be home. We're dropping Liam off soon. Kara, hey, Jess, are you ignoring us? We're kind of in a rush. I didn't respond to any of it. Instead, I turned my phone to silent, tossed it into the passenger seat, and headed out of Chicago. The drive stretched on, the city skyline disappearing behind me as I made my way toward the hills of Tennessee. With every mile I put between myself and home, I felt lighter. They could figure it out. It wasn't my problem. The cabin was even better than the photos. I pulled into the gravel driveway, surrounded by towering trees that swayed gently in the afternoon breeze. The place looked like something out of a movie, quaint but sturdy, with a woodsy charm that made me feel at ease the second I stepped inside. The air smelled of pine, the kind of fresh scent you never get in the city. I dropped my bags on the floor and wandered through the small space, taking it all in. There was a crackling fireplace, a stack of cozy blankets in the corner, and a kitchen stocked with coffee and tea. The best part was the deck. I opened the back door and stepped outside, letting the cool mountain air wash over me. The view stretched out forever. Rolling hills, deep green valleys, and nothing but the sound of birds and the wind rustling the trees. I couldn't help but smile. For the first time in days, I felt calm, free. I spent the first day doing nothing. No texts, no calls, no guilt trips. Just me, a cup of coffee, and a view that felt like it belonged only to me. I curled up on the couch with a book I'd been meaning to read for months and let the hours slip by. But of course, the peace didn't last long. The next morning, when I finally checked my phone, I found exactly what I'd expected. A storm of missed calls and angry texts. Mom, where are you? The kids need to be dropped off. This isn't funny. Cassandra, I can't believe you're doing this. Everyone's waiting. Kara, are you serious? We've been counting on you. Mom, voicemail Jess, honey, I don't understand why you're acting like this. We're family. Families help each other. I just don't understand why you're being so difficult. I set the phone back down and took a deep breath. I had expected this, but it still stung. They were angry because their plans were unraveling, and they needed someone to blame. I was their scapegoat, but not this time. I grabbed my hiking boots and headed outside. The trail closest to the cabin led up a hill with a stunning view at the top, or so the cabin guidebook said. The air was cool, and the sound of my boots crunching against the leaves was oddly soothing. Every step helped me shake off their voices, their guilt trips, their entitlement. By the time I reached the top of the trail, my legs ached, and my cheeks were flushed, but the view made it all worth it. The hills stretched out in every direction, blanketed in greens and golds, with patches of morning fog still clinging to the valleys below. I sat on a rock at the summit and let out a long, slow breath. I didn't care how angry they were. They hadn't invited me. They had planned everything behind my back and left me out like I didn't matter. Now they were furious because I wasn't falling in line. Let them figure it out. That night, I turned off my phone completely. I spent hours soaking in the hot tub under a sky full of stars, listening to the quiet hum of crickets in the distance. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't worried about anyone but myself. I deserved this. I needed this. And if my family couldn't understand that, well, that was their problem, not mine. The third morning at the cabin started off like a dream. I woke up early, made myself a strong cup of coffee, and sat out on the deck, wrapped in a blanket as the sun broke over the horizon. It was quiet, peaceful, the exact opposite of the chaos I knew was waiting for me back home. I hadn't turned my phone on in 2 days, and it felt liberating not to be at anyone's beck and call. No notifications, no guilt trips, no one asking me to drop everything for them. It was just me, the smell of pine in the air, and the soft rustle of leaves. But I knew the silence couldn't last forever. Eventually, curiosity got the better of me, and I turned my phone back on. The screen lit up immediately, a flood of missed calls, texts, and voicemails pouring in like an unstoppable wave. My heart sank. I scrolled through the notifications, one after another. Mom, Jess, we're trying to reach you. Where are you? This isn't funny. Cassandra, you're being so selfish right now. Do you have any idea what you're putting us through? Kara, I had to cancel the cruise. I can't believe you did this to me. Mom, please call me back. We just want to understand why you're acting like this. And then there was a text from Cassandra that nearly made me drop my phone. Cassandra, you ruined everything. We had to scramble to find someone to watch Liam, and Kara's furious. She lost so much money because of you. I hope you're happy. I stared at the words, my thumb hovering over the screen. Happy? Was I happy? No. I wasn't happy about any of this. But I wasn't guilty, either. I wasn't responsible for fixing their mess, and I wasn't going to let them twist this into being my fault. Still, it was hard to ignore the sting. I'd always been the reliable one, the person who showed up when no one else could. So much so that they'd stopped seeing me as a person with my own life. And now, because I dared to say no, they were treating me like the villain of the story. I threw my phone onto the couch and went outside. I needed space, fresh air, something to clear my head before I spiraled back into the anger and hurt they'd buried me under. The hiking trail was still damp from the early morning dew, the smell of wet earth clinging to the air. As I walked, I let my thoughts unravel. They didn't ask. That was what I kept coming back to. They didn't ask. They didn't sit me down and say, "Hey Jess, we're planning a trip, but we really need help with the kids. Could you watch them?" No. They'd gone ahead and made a decision for me, just assumed I'd fall in line because I always had. And now that I'd broken the pattern, they couldn't handle it. By the time I got back to the cabin, I felt calmer, but the peace didn't last. My phone buzzed again. Another voicemail from my mom. I hesitated before pressing play, bracing myself for whatever guilt trip she had lined up this time. Her voice was soft but strained, like she'd been crying. "Jess, honey, I just don't understand why you're acting like this. We're family. Families help each other, don't they? Your sister and Kara are really struggling because of this. I know you're upset, but this isn't like you. We're all just so hurt, sweetheart. Aunt Maggie's day is being overshadowed by this drama, and I know you don't want that. Please call me back." I closed my eyes, pressing the phone to my forehead as her words sank in. There it was, the guilt, the disappointment, the same tactics they always used to get me to cave. But I couldn't let them win this time. I wouldn't. I grabbed my phone, opened my family group chat, the same group I hadn't even known existed until all of this, and started typing. My hands shook, but I knew exactly what I wanted to say. "Hi everyone. I'm hearing a lot of blame being thrown my way for the issues with the trip, so let me set the record straight. First of all, I wasn't invited on this cruise. Nobody told me about it until I found out by accident. That alone was hurtful. Second, I never agreed to babysit anyone's kids. You all decided that for me without even asking. That's not fair, and it's not my responsibility. Lastly, moving forward, I need to set some boundaries. If you need my help, you need to ask me directly, and if I say no, that's the end of it. I love this family, but I deserve to be treated with respect. I'm not just the reliable one. I'm a person, too." I hit send before I could second-guess myself and dropped the phone on the table. The silence afterward felt deafening. My hands were still shaking, and my heart pounded in my chest. I'd said what needed to be said, but I knew the fallout was coming. It didn't take long. The first reply came from Cassandra. Of course. Are you serious right now? You're turning this into a pity party. We're the ones struggling because of you. Grow up, Jess. Then Kara jumped in. You cost me hundreds of dollars. Do you even care about how hard it is to find someone to watch the twins last minute? You could have made this easy for everyone, but you chose not to. My mom chimed in next, her message softer but no less manipulative. Jess, we didn't mean to hurt you. We just thought you'd understand. This isn't worth tearing the family apart over. Please, let's fix this. I stared at the screen, my anger flaring back to life. Tearing the family apart? That was rich. I wasn't the one who left someone out of a family trip and expected them to pick up the slack. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I tried to think of a response, but then my phone rang. It was my mom. Again. I let it ring, but she called back immediately. Fine. I answered. Jess? She started, her voice sounding almost frantic. Can we please talk about this? Your sister and Kara are both really upset. Everyone's just so stressed. Mom, I said, trying to stay calm. I'm not the one who caused this mess. You all made plans without me, and then you assumed I'd take care of everything. That's not fair. But we thought. No. I cut her off. You didn't think. You didn't think about me at all. You decided my time, and my plans didn't matter. And now that I'm not doing what you want, suddenly I'm the bad guy? No. That's not okay. There was silence on the other end. I could hear her breathing, but she didn't say anything. Mom, I love you, I said finally, but I'm not apologizing for this. You all need to figure it out without me. I just don't want this to tear us apart, she said softly. Then maybe you should think about how you treat me, I replied. Because I'm done being the backup plan. She didn't respond to that. Instead, she muttered, I hope you're happy with yourself, and hung up. The second the call ended, I felt both relief and exhaustion. My hands were shaking again, but this time, it wasn't from anger. It was from the weight of it all, the years of being overlooked, the expectation that I would always be the reliable one. I stood there for a moment, staring out the cabin's window. Outside, the trees swayed gently, indifferent to my family's drama. I let out a deep breath, letting the tension in my shoulders ease just a little. For once, I hadn't folded. For once, I'd stood my ground. And if they couldn't understand that, then that was their problem to figure out. The next morning, I woke up to a cabin bathed in soft sunlight. It was quiet, so quiet that I could hear the distant rustling of leaves and birds chirping through the open window. For the first time in days, I felt something close to peace. But that didn't last long. I knew the moment I turned my phone back on, the fallout from my message would hit me like a freight train. And sure enough, the screen lit up with missed calls and a barrage of texts. The family group chat was a disaster zone. Cassandra, I can't believe you. You've ruined everything. Kara, you are so selfish, Jess. You think you're the victim here, but you've made everyone else's life harder. Mom, Jess, please call me back. This isn't how families act. And the cherry on top? Cassandra, Aunt Maggie is so disappointed in you. Do you even care how much you've hurt her? I stared at that last message, my blood running hot. Aunt Maggie. They were dragging her into this now, using her as leverage. That was low, even for Cassandra. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I was too angry, and anything I said would only add fuel to the fire. Instead, I shut my phone off again, pulled on my hiking boots, and left the cabin for the day. The trail behind the cabin wound through dense trees and up steep hills, and I pushed myself harder than I probably should have. By the time I reached the summit, my legs were burning and my chest ached, but the view was worth it. The valley stretched out below me, painted in shades of green and gold, the mountains fading into the distance. I sat on a rock, wiping sweat off my forehead and letting the cool breeze wash over me. I needed to think. Had I really ruined everything? Had I really hurt Aunt Maggie? No matter how I looked at it, I couldn't see how this was my fault. I hadn't excluded myself from that cruise. I hadn't asked them to plan for me to babysit without asking. And yet, here I was, being blamed for all of it. It wasn't fair. None of it was fair. As the wind rustled the trees, I thought about all the times I'd said yes when I didn't want to. All the favors I'd done for my family without complaint. Watching Liam when Cassandra's sitter bailed at the last minute. Helping Kara with her twins when she swore she just needed an hour to catch up on errands. Rearranging my life to accommodate their emergencies because I was so reliable. But the moment I said no, I became the villain. I shook my head, staring out at the view. It wasn't worth it anymore. I wasn't going to keep bending over backward for people who didn't respect me enough to ask for my help in the first place. By the time I got back to the cabin, my legs were sore, but my mind was clear. I showered, made myself some dinner, and finally, felt like I could breathe again. That peace lasted about 10 minutes. My phone buzzed on the table. I'd left it turned off all day, but now curiosity got the better of me. When I unlocked it, I saw a single missed call from Aunt Maggie. My heart skipped a beat. For a moment, I hesitated. I didn't want her to be dragged into this mess, but I knew I couldn't ignore her. Not Aunt Maggie. I called her back, pacing nervously as the phone rang. Jess? Aunt Maggie's voice came through the line, warm and familiar. Hey, Aunt Maggie, I said quietly. Sorry I missed your call. Oh, it's all right, sweetheart, she said gently. I just wanted to check in on you. I've been hearing, well, a lot of noise. I let out a humorless laugh. That makes two of us. I wanted to tell you something, she continued, her voice steady but kind. I didn't know you hadn't been invited on this trip. I assumed you were coming with us. My throat tightened. You didn't know? No, she said firmly. If I had known, I would have insisted. You're as much a part of this family as anyone else, Jess. I don't know why they left you out, but I want you to know. I'm sorry. That wasn't right. I sank down onto the couch, her words washing over me like a balm on an open wound. She sounded so genuine, so different from everyone else who'd only cared about how I'd ruined their plans. Thanks, Aunt Maggie, I said, my voice quieter now. That means a lot. I don't know why they put all this on you, she continued. It's not fair. You've always been so helpful, but that doesn't mean you don't deserve time for yourself. Don't let them make you feel otherwise. Tears pricked the back of my eyes. It was stupid, really, how a few kind words could undo days of frustration and anger. I appreciate that, I said, my voice thick. Take care of yourself, Jess, she said softly. And don't let them guilt you into anything you don't want to do. You're allowed to put yourself first sometimes. When the call ended, I sat there for a long time, staring at my phone. Aunt Maggie got it. She understood what no one else in the family seemed to, that I wasn't just the helper, the backup plan, the person who always stepped up. I was a person, too. The next day, I decided to put my final stamp on this mess. I opened the family group chat, still a war zone of passive-aggressive messages and blame, and sent one last message. Hey everyone, I appreciate all the feedback, but let me be clear. I didn't ruin anything. I wasn't invited on the trip. Nobody asked if I was okay with babysitting. You made assumptions, and now you're upset because I didn't go along with it. That's on you, not me. I'm not responsible for fixing this, and I'm not apologizing for putting myself first for once. If you can't understand that, then I don't know what to tell you. I hit send and muted the chat. It felt final, like shutting a door I should have closed years ago. Afterward, I spent the rest of the day as far away from my phone as possible. I hiked another trail, spent hours sitting by the fire with a book, and soaked in the hot tub under the evening sky. I didn't think about the fallout. I didn't worry about what my family was saying or doing. I just let myself exist, something I hadn't done in years. When the week at the cabin finally came to an end, I packed my bags and loaded up the car with a sense of calm I hadn't felt in a long time. The drive back to Chicago felt different this time. I wasn't dreading what waited for me. I wasn't carrying the same weight I'd left with. Let them be mad. Let them call me selfish. I knew the truth now. I wasn't the villain in their story. I was just the person who finally decided to stop playing the role they'd written for me. And if they couldn't handle that, well, that was their problem, not mine.